Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in to Molly's Salon. This is our weekly program every Thursday evening where I interview innovative thinkers and creative firebrands. And we are living through a critical time in American history, the COVID-19 pandemic and a vital social justice movement led by Black Lives Matter. Our guests are a variety of artists and leaders discussing new ideas, how they're coping with the coronavirus and making positive social change, as well as showing us glimmers of hope for the future, which is something we all need right now. My guests this week are Jocelyn Clarke, Arena Stage dramaturg, Idris Goodwin, playwright and power play commission writer, and Philippa P.B. Hughes, social sculptor and cultural strategist. First up is Jocelyn Clarke, coming to us from Ireland. And Jocelyn is a freelance dramaturg and writer. He's currently theater advisor to the Arts Council of Ireland, as well as resident dramaturg with Arena Stage. He's taught dramaturgy at the John Kennedy Center, Columbia University, Trinity College in Dublin. He was commissioning and literary manager of the Abbey Theatre in Ireland for 4 years and lead theater critic with the Sunday Tribune for 9 years. Oh, you're one of the wildcats there. It's so great to see you, Jocelyn.
You too.
I'm so glad you moved from the dark side of theater criticism into the lighter side of making theater.
Well, as people like to say, particularly dramaturgs like to say, that the first dramaturg, Gotthold Lessing, was in fact a theatre critic who did that classic thing of like, you're doing it all wrong. And they said, okay, you show it. And then he screwed it up as well. But I mean, the principle is the same. I mean, in some ways, you're asking the same questions that audience members are asking of the play that they're watching. And so as a dramaturg, you should be kind of asking the same questions as well of the play that you're working on.
Well, you know, people are really confused about what a dramaturg is. They always give it kind of dog ears, like, what is that? What do you do? And I'd love for you to talk about what you do and maybe talk about American Prophet, because this is a project that you're working on right now with Marcus and Charles Randolph Wright. So talk a little bit about the way in which you work with writers.
Yeah, I mean, when people say what's a really quick definition of dramaturgy, I always give the same one, which is it's the art of writing or producing a play. And that covers everything from being a production dramaturg, so you're working on existing texts or classical texts and you're providing research to it. Or else if you're working on new plays, you're actually engaged actively in the writing process of the new work at the moment. And so there is a kind of a lot of smoke and mirrors in discussions about dramaturgy, but it's actually, for me, it's a very simple process, which is to ask lots and lots of questions all of the time. Because I think there are two things to keep in mind when you're working with an artist on a new play, particularly. One is that there is the intentionality of the artist herself or himself, and then there is the intentionality of the play. And so many people think that whatever the playwright thinks or is thinking about the play at that moment is actually what the play is doing. And of course, you discover that's not the case at all. The play is a work of art that is in many ways doing its own thing, and the artist is shaping it in the way she or he is interested in. But then what my job is to say, the play is going in this way, and you're thinking the play is going in that way. So how do I bring them together? So for me, it really is always about making the playwrights by asking a lot of questions about what their own intentionality is for the play, and then enabling them to see how their play is evolving, and then to make choices about which way they want to go with the work. So that process of kind of interrogation means that I'm really also trying to say to the playwright that you are in charge of your world. Like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just asking questions. So you get to make the choices. Because too many times I learned at the O'Neill by watching dramaturgs there, I learned what bad dramaturgy was, which was where dramaturgs are telling the playwrights what to do. and there is an assumed authority. And I found that really odd as a process. Like, it doesn't work. And what you really want are the people who are making the work to have a full sense of autonomy around the work and a full sense of authority of the work. And so that you're actually building up their confidence, but you're also building up their knowledge of their own work by simply asking questions. And I always propose this, that I'm not interested in dramaturgs, particularly in their role or their function, because I think it's up to each dramaturg to define his or her role in a room. But I am much more interested in assigning the dramaturgical function to anyone in the room. So I think that you can say to anyone in the room, today you are the dramaturg, and these are the things that we want you to watch, these are the things that we want you to think about, and these are the questions that we want you to ask as a group. And at the end of the day, that person is charged with that task, and it is a task in many ways. I mean, my job, the other thing that I have to think about when I'm a dramaturg is to be the memory of a production. So I have to remember all of the conversations that have taken place by all the different elements of the creative team or even actors' or thoughts. And so that when the play seems to be drifting or the production is going in a different direction than we have all mutually agreed, is to remind people that this is what we said. So we're at a pinch point or a juncture. We can make a choice about this. We can either go in the way that we thought, or we're going to go in this way. And if we're going to go in this way, then what does that mean? And I think that's, key is that you have to remember where you've been in order to know where you're going.
So in the case of something like American Prophet, and I just want to backtrack for a moment because you and I met at the Sundance Institute probably 15 years ago. I was a literary advisor and you were a dramaturg there. And it was the time that I spent with you there that I knew that you would really be right for Arena Stage. And I don't know if our audiences are aware of this, but Jocelyn is one of the best dramaturgs, certainly in America and probably in the Northern Hemispheres.
Very nice.
His work, as you can tell by the kinds of questions he's asking, very exciting and opens up the artist to more and more ideas. So what would happen on a project like American Prophet?
Well, in American Prophet, talking with both Marcus and Charles, because they're also co-writing the book together. And Charles is directing, and Marcus is writing the songs, and they're co-writing the lyrics. And all the lyrics in the book, 95% of it are actually based on the words of Frederick Douglass. So the questions really, I just asked both of them a lot of questions and saying, well, what do you want this piece to be? How do you want it to exist on the stage? And what are the intentions that you have for it in terms of what kind of transformation you want the audience to experience? Because ultimately, I think every excellent piece of theater is one that is transformative. It transforms the audience in some way, that you leave the theater changed in some way, or stirred, or transformed in kind of the broadest sense of that word. And they were both very keen on the idea that we wouldn't meet the elder statesman Douglas, but we would actually meet the young firebrand Douglas, and that he would therefore speak to us much more directly. And there will be a sense that the historical moment that he's describing also is actually, things have not changed as much as many people would like to think, and that it is actually tuned to the contemporary moment. And so there was a sense in which, in the early initial development of the piece, that it was still the elder statesman. And so my job is, the question I kept asking is, how is this not the elder statesman? So how formally do we begin to explore to make it to seem like a firebrand, to seem much more revolutionary, to seem that it is actually talking much more directly to the audience? And that shift and that constant reminding of their own intentions for the piece, that it will be a young firebrand, for example, or a younger firebrand, not young, that what would that be and how would that manifest? And so by just constantly reiterating that very simple question, it means it puts a pressure on the scenes in the right way. And then secondly, it is a great delight, actually, rereading and reading for the first time some of Douglas's writings, and also other writings of the period, is, what an extraordinary thinker he is. So really, how do you incorporate into the storytelling of the musical his thoughts, and how do we manifest the thoughts? And if we are saying that it's in an immediate moment that you have a very real sense that Frederick Douglass is speaking to us through history, then how do we manifest that thought? And so every scene is not just a historical narrative of that, then this, and then this, and then this, but rather there's a very strong sense that he is showing us a world in order to for us to think, and then also to make change in the world after we leave the theater.
Right, and it's also what an ideal time to be producing American Prophet, because if there is a time for a resurgence of Frederick Douglass, it's right now.
Absolutely.
It's right now. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say that, what's interesting is that we meet every few months, and, it's been interesting in the last 6 months how the conversations have shifted because of what's happening in the world outside, and particularly in the streets, that there is a very strong sense that the piece now it was already engaged, but it must engage much more fully in the contemporary moment.
Absolutely. And Jocelyn, if you can believe it, they've already told me that I only have about a minute left with you.
Oh, wow, that was zippy.
That was zippy. That went. And so I just want to know, what's giving you joy these days?
What's giving me joy actually is watching artists and companies, and I'm currently in Dublin, is where I spend most of my time, is watching how artists and companies and arts organizations are engaging with their communities now in this moment of COVID, and how they're beginning to repurpose their spaces. And how they're beginning to engage with the public, not in terms of audience development, but actually how do I engage with my community? And so, for example, I'm working with one company where one of the things that they're thinking about doing is making a book of the day, which is a book that will be given to 25,000 people in the small town. And it will chart the day in the life of the town with photographs. And so everybody will have a copy. And so that's a different kind of performance. And then there are other artists who are making sand sculptures along the sea and inviting audiences to come. And then they're resurrecting, work by Yeats, and they're performing it on the side of a mountain. So there is socially distanced art happening, but it's much more focused on local communities. And I think if there's any kind of positive out of the COVID, and there's very few positives, but if there was a positive, is that how theater is actually beginning to go back to its roots in the right way, which is it needs to engage with its communities much more directly and much more imaginatively than perhaps it has been doing up until now.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Well, it's so great to see you, Jocelyn, and I can't wait to see you in the flesh in March.
Exactly. Listen, take care. Lots of love.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I may look a little bit different to you right now, and that is because we actually recorded Jocelyn in Ireland earlier in the day, so we didn't have to stay up until midnight. But it's really, really great to be with all of you. And I have two other wonderful guests. Idris Goodwin is next. He's a multidisciplinary arts leader and creative community builder. And across 2 decades, he's forged a multifaceted career as an award-winning scriptwriter for both stage and screen. He's a breakbeat poet, he's a director, he's an educator, and he's an organizer. And he's the new director of the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center at Colorado College. He is also an arena stage power play commissioned playwright. So welcome to you, Idris. It's so great to see you now in Colorado Springs.
That's right. That's right.
Show us the outside. Can you move your computer?
The outside? Yeah, for sure. Check this out.
Because we're here all over the country, but we're also in Washington, D.C. And oh my God, it's so beautiful.
I wish y'all could see the other view. I mean, I am in an area, I'm in an area called Mountain Shadows. And so you can kind of see the town a little bit too. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And things like a view are really coming in handy these days.
Well, I'm sure it's a beautiful place to work right now in Washington, D.C. The rain is absolutely crazy. And earlier today, about an hour and a half ago, the thunder and the lightning was biblical. It was, it was so crackling that it was scary. So we've got some flash flooding going on.
Oh man, oh man. But I love DC. I hope you guys are well out there. I miss DC. I miss coming to Arena Stage and working on my play. And I'm so glad to be in this moment because it's been a relatively new relationship, but it's been really wonderful to be in the mix with you all. And it's so great to hear from Jocelyn. I love that dude. And it's just, I feel really fortunate that he and I have gotten to work together through this Power Plays program. That is definitely a major perk.
Well, I would love it if you would talk to our audience because they're very curious about what your new play is about. Would you talk about it?
Yeah, so my power play is called Scarfoot Lives, and the sort of the seed of the germination of it was really thinking about Reconstruction and the failure of Reconstruction, which is that period right after the Civil War where, you know, it was really a period of reconciliation of the country saying, okay, we can't just end this, you know, this thing that's been going on for centuries and just throw these people out. And like, we got to create systems and a process and structures to move things, you know, along. And it was dismantled after 8 years due to a deal that was made between, you know, some Southern politicians and the president at the time. And so as a result of that, you know, we get Jim Crow, we get basically the problems that persist today around race is that we skip that very important step of reconciliation, which if you go to other countries, you know, that had these kinds of state-sanctioned atrocities, you know, in Germany, there's like there was some major reconciliation and constant reminders of, yeah, we did this awful thing and we need to talk about it and then we need to acknowledge it so it does not happen again. America didn't do that. And so I wrote this play that starts during that era and follows one family across many generations. Really the point being is what is the way in which freedom has been stalled, right? Freedom has been stalled. And we see it through the prism of just this one family of creative people, the ways in which freedom is sort of doled out, right? And the effects that it has on them. But to make it more complicated, I was told recently by a director friend of mine that all my plays are about art and love, the intersection of art and love. And so this is a family of creative people. So this idea of freedom, I just tied with like actual freedom versus with creative freedom, which, you know, I think for artists of color, particularly Black artists, there's so many layers to our creative expression. You know, W.E.B. Du Bois is one of our great thinkers, but he's also one of our great writers, and he also wrote fiction. And you know, and so Ta-Nehisi Coates, you see it with Ta-Nehisi Coates, like writes comic books, but also writes like, you know, beautiful, searing essays about race in America. You know, and so the play is really kind of this you know, multi-generational, family experience. Meditation, you know, on freedom and the Black experience, and the title comes from this character in this story that is passed down. You know, this character named Scarfoot who never stops running. So there's a lot going on, but it's a good play. It's a good play, Molly.
Listen, it's a terrific play. The last reading I heard of it. What I love about your thinking is how it winds in and out of time, and we keep picking up the resonance through the decades, which is the way our lives are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the things that happened to our parents and our grandparents, sometimes we find that we are acting them out in our own lives. And I feel like you've really done that with Scarfoot Lives.
Thank you.
It's exciting. It's exciting. And I know that you're working on another project, the Ali Summit, with the Actors Theater of Louisville, it's online, right?
Well, so it's this has been like a crazy process. So so first of all, shout out Robert Barry Fleming, who you all know. He's a new executive artistic director at Actors Theater Louisville. And so I was living in Louisville at the time. I was just, my previous gig, I was the artistic director of Stage One Family Theater, which is a youth theater. I got a whole other life doing theater for young people. And we got this funding from the Doris Duke Foundation as part of this building demand project. And I was like, we're going to write this play about this historic meeting between Black athletes that happened in 1967. And, you know, Ali had just announced that he was not going to go to the Vietnam War because of his religious beliefs. And so they were going to strip him of the title. Jim Brown, Bill Russell, Lou Alcindor, who would later become Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, John Wooten, all of these, you know, the LeBrons and Steph Currys of the day gathered with Ali in Cleveland at the Black Economic Summit to talk about, yo, man, are you sure you want to do this? We got your back, but we got to make sure you're for real. And no one knows what happened once those doors closed. No one heard what that conversation was. And so the play is like my attempt to imagine what the conversation was. But then, we had this whole community component we were going to do and everything. And then March happened. Wow. And so I said, you know, I'm going to try something I've never tried before, which is that I'm going to try to open up my process and share things online. Like, here's a bit of research I found. Here's an interview I did. Here's a monologue I wrote. And so you're able to engage with the play as I'm creating it online. And then as far as like the final destination or what the final production looks like, we don't really know. But we're just sort of like embracing the digital and the virtual and the space that we're all in now as part of the process. I've never tried this before. And it's been really fascinating and kind of fun and liberating and terrifying. But at the same time, I think about plays like Scarfoot, and I'm just like, that's such a good play. I can't wait for theater to come back because I want y'all to see this play. So anyway, but yeah, I'm keeping busy.
Well, it's time. We want to get back into the theaters, that's for sure. So yeah. What's bringing you joy these days, Idris?
Oh, my children, 100%. My son is 8. He just turned 8. And he's like all big, and he's like walking around the house, and he's like all big, and I'm like, who's the little man in my house, you know? And then my other son turns 1 this month, and they're just a trip. They bring me so much joy, you know. I was just joking with you earlier that, you know, my other capacity as the director of an organization, you know, most of my days are talking about, you know, financial impact and security guards and plexiglass and like all that. And so when I get off of those long, tedious Zoom calls, like, you know, my son will just be walking around the house with like a sausage in his diaper, you know, just walking around like gnawing on a sausage. And, you know, it's like, who can be upset? Who can be upset?
Well, you bring me joy, Idris. I mean, who you are as a human being and the life you bring into the world is incredible.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's high praise coming from you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. It's a joy to see you.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
Next time, let's see each other for real, okay?
Yeah. Wear your mask, everybody. Everybody wear your mask. Wash your hands.
Everybody wear your mask. That's right. All right. You take care, Idris.
Right, peace.
Bye-bye. My next guest is really a fascinating woman. It's Philippa P.B. Hughes, and she is a social sculptor and a cultural strategist. She designs art-fueled projects, connects people who would not normally meet in meaningful, humanizing dialogue, and she's a catalyst for the curious to participate, innovate, act, and conspire with passion, generosity, empathy, and ingenuity. Hi, Philippa.
Hi, how are you, Molly?
So good to see you. We've been in the middle of this crazy thunderstorm, haven't we?
Yeah, I got caught in it. It's been a disaster all evening. But I'm happy to be here now.
I'm thrilled that you're here. It's so great to have you here. Talk about what it means to be a social sculptor and cultural strategist. I'm sure our audience is really curious about these ideas.
Well, I kind of stole the title of social sculptor from an artist named Joseph Beuys. He was very popular in the 70s, or I don't know if he was popular, but that's when he was most prolific. And, he designed spaces for people to basically interact and form relationships with each other. And those art pieces would not be complete until people actually talk to each other. And so that's what inspires me to do the work that I do now is, I'm most interested in relationships and how we build them, how we strengthen them, how we even just start them. And so everything I do is geared toward how do we talk to each other toward the goal of relationships.
That's so great. You are bringing really exciting dialogue to the community. Something like blueberries plus cherries brings people of different viewpoints together for a meal and encourages civil dialogue on big topics. So how do you do that?
Well, I should back up to tell you how that all started. Blueberries and cherries was sort of, it wasn't meant to be a project. Right after the 2016 election, when we were all sort of catatonic, I just was like, I can't just sit around doing nothing and being depressed. So I started inviting people who voted for Trump to my house for dinner because I wanted to ask them some questions. And, I read all these books and articles about, those people, but I was like, I think there's something more to this that I need to know, directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And so, I just kept doing that over and over, and it kept growing. It kept becoming just more interesting for me. And I kind of wanted to share that with other people. And so that became the basis for a much larger project that I work on now called Looking for America, in which we organize large scale dinners across the country. But sort of our twist on that, because a lot of organizations are, trying to bring people together across the political divide in various ways. And I would think we should all be doing that. But we're using art as a way into the conversation. So that's sort of, I think that art can be a way to inspire curiosity about people. And when we have more curiosity, we humanize, and we feel more a part of the fabric of humanity. And so we start seeing the other person as a human. And then, we begin to forget that, they're this avatar of politics. Now it's like much more nuanced. There's more depth to the person. And that's how we start building relationships.
That's so great. I have a technical question. For when you have created these dinners, of course, before COVID-19, how did you do them? Did you have people bring things? Did you do everything yourself? How did you make this happen?
When the dinners were at my house, right here, right over this dining table right here, I never had more than, say, 6 or 8 people. I cooked dinner. And my idea was that I am offering you a gift. I'm inviting you to my home and we're going to break bread together. So it was sort of like, that's sort of my little trade. I'm going to make you dinner and then you're going to sit down and have this very difficult conversation with people that disagree with you. Now, when we do the larger dinners in other places, I actually have a really good funder, good supporter of this project. And so it's all catered. And so they're quite nice dinners, but it's not about having like a fancy dinner. It's really about saying it's a gift to you. I don't want to make people work for it, or it's already really hard to have these conversations. And so it's a gift. And so this is what we're giving you. And we ask you to come into this space and have a respectful conversation.
It's so great. It's so great.
Thank you.
In finding the people, how do you do that? Do you advertise? Do you write about it on Facebook? Do you ask friends? As a theater director, we're always curating whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're casting a production with the actors, or whether we're bringing in designers, or whether we're commissioning the writers, however that works, we're curating it. How do you curate?
Well, that's really hard. Probably like you, Molly, I don't have a lot of conservative friends. And so it was really hard in the beginning. And in fact, the very first dinner, I posted an invitation on Facebook and said, I would really like to invite some, people over who voted for Trump. And of course, nobody responded. Nobody said yes. I don't know. And so I just started, digging into my own networks, and I kept asking and asking people. And finally, a liberal friend said, "Oh, I think I used to work with one," And so she made that introduction, and we talked, and I convinced her, like, I'm not here to yell at you or call you stupid. And so she said yes. And then, of course, people hang out with other people like themselves. So I asked her, like, do you have any friends you could bring with you? And that's how we created the first dinner. So now when I'm going to other cities, usually I'm a pretty good networker. I feel like that's one of my superpowers. And so I usually know one person. And so I just start like networking the heck out of that one person. But I also will do some cold calling, like I'll contact the local Rotary Club, places that often have more conservative people. It's not hard to get the liberals on board, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And a lot of times it's just because conservative people, they think we're going to yell at them and call them stupid. And so I have to like really convince them that, no, that's not what this is about. And so it's a lot of really hardcore recruiting and, assuring people that we're creating, good, like respectful space for this kind of dialogue.
And I can only imagine how fantastic the conversations are.
It's been amazing. It's been amazing. And I noticed you asked the others about what gives them joy or hope. And I tell you, that is what gives me hope, is that people want to do this. And I know that, there's this narrative out there about how polarized we are. And yes, we are. Like the loudest people on social media and in the real media are very polarized. So I've invented a new phrase. I have decided that this is my new catchline. I'm out there, I am disrupting the polarization industrial complex, because there are people out there, there are institutions out there who profit from polarization. And my anecdotal experience of going around the country and talking to people, to real people, is that most people want to talk to each other. They're exhausted by this rhetoric that's out there, this narrative, and we have to change the narrative and to change the motive for how we exist in our country. Polarization clearly is not working for us right now, and we need to change that.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end the interview. Philippa, thank you so much for coming on. I love what you do.
Thank you.
For people who want to go online and see your work, they should look it up on thepinklineconnects.com.
Oh, and actually,
no?
Nope.
Looking for America?
Yep. If you go to lookingforamerica.us, US, get it?
Lookingforamerica.us.
Uh-huh.
All right. Great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Take care. My guest next week will be Samayeni 24, who is a playwright, a director, an actor, and arena stage master teaching artist. Deborah Brevoort, playwright and musical theater librettist and lyricist with projects like The Women of Lockerbie. And Lex Sant, who is the president of the Sant Foundation. Now on Monday, something really exciting is happening. It's Labor Day, and Be an Arts Hero is launching an artist work day. Did you know that the arts bring in $877 billion a year? More than the airlines, more than construction, more than agriculture. And the arts, in a way, are an unsung part of the American economy, because we're 4.5% of the entire American economy. Think about that for a moment. The number of artists, arts organizations, performers, painters, sculptors that we have in the United States. That's how much we take into the American economy. And this is a moment to write your senators and say, support the arts, because we're an economic engine. We have a new film that's coming out. This is today's gift of art that will be launching the middle of September, called The 51st State. It is focused on the protests after George Floyd's murder, to the growing movement for racial justice, to Washington, D.C.'s fight for sovereignty as the 51st state. It's hyperlocal. It's done with all writers from Washington, D.C., subjects from here, actors, directors, film crew, composer. And I'm really excited because right now we are premiering the sizzle reel to whet your appetite.
The story of Washington, D.C. has been a civil rights story since its inception.
What about statehood for D.C.?
You can't separate sovereignty, statehood, and racial justice.
If you don't like it, move. Something new is trying to be born.
I used to think just being nice and accepting of everyone was enough, but that's not enough.
There's no running from anything anymore.
I have to believe the best because my boys are growing up in this.
So get out there and go.